Hello, everybody, and happy Wednesday. So, Stephanie, we talked about some 2024 predictions earlier this week related to like the crazy and weird shit going on right now, but we have not covered anything related to the November elections or global politics. And we didn't even mention Biden's most recent campaign speech that he did earlier this week, or the speech he did at the church where he totally went off the fucking deep end again. And there's just so much going on that we haven't talked about. And there's this shit show debacle that's been unfolding in the White House earlier this week as well. So we're going to cover this stuff and more today. And there's some pretty interesting predictions being tossed around about the upcoming election. And honestly, I'm surprised they're coming up so quickly because I thought it would be a few months, but we're just diving into 24 with this stuff. But Stephanie, first I have to ask you, did you watch Biden's speech on Monday? Because I swear it totally brought back the vibes from his red curtain evil dictator speech in 2022.
Oh, yeah. It was totally the evil dictator Nazi type vibe again. But I mean, like, that's what you do when you have nothing good to say about the job that you've done. Like, he knows he can't win on his record. So he's just going to continue to, attack Trump politically. He tries to throw him in jail on top of it. I mean, like, what do we expect? What else is he going to do? Like, you look at where we're at, we're less safe as a nation. He's failing on national security, failing on securing our border, failing on the now 100,000 plus migrant children missing, failing on the economy and inflation. He can't even walk up a flight of stairs or off a stage. And he doesn't know when his defense secretary is MIA for 2 weeks. Like, the whole thing is a joke. So, I mean, honestly, it's like the only card he has left to play is to attack Trump and hope that these never Trumpers are still out there and willing to risk their national security and economic security by voting for Biden again instead of Trump. But the fact of the matter is, what I think is that most people that are reasonable and intelligent can plainly see that life was better under Trump's presidency. Like, our country wasn't being threatened by nuclear attack from North Korea. China was walking on eggshells, Russia too. There was peace in the Middle East. The economy was great. Gas and food prices were low. The stock market was amazing. You could actually afford a home and a car. And America wasn't viewed as a little bitch. So, like, this whole thing that he's going to again, the whole Trump and MAGA, it didn't work 2 years ago, and it sure as hell isn't going to work this time. So I think Biden's going to have to come up with a much better plan.
Okay, wait, before we go on, did you know that he started the civil rights movement?
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what he said earlier this week.
No,
He gave
he
this.
did?
Oh, yes, he did. He was doing that I'm not going to call it a sermon, whatever, speech at the church, and he was basically saying he's been there more than most Black people have been there in this Black church, and gave himself credit for starting the civil rights movement.
Didn't his own vice president go on like a rant while they were campaigning that he like was a segregationist? And I
Yeah.
mean, he's on video saying he doesn't want like, you know, Black kids to go to school with his kids and stuff
Oh
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But now he
Yeah.
starts the civil rights movement.
He's
Okay.
the leader of the civil rights movement. Um, and so once again, more senility and just craziness coming out of his mouth. Um, but as we've been talking about for over a year now, it sounds like their plan just might be to get rid of Biden and replace him with someone else. And so one of the predictions that's come up this week is from a top executive at JP Morgan. His name is Michael Sembalest, and he's the chairman of market and investment strategy at the Wall Street Bank. And he put together this list of 10 predictions of what he calls possible surprises for investors to watch out for this year. And one of those predictions is that Biden will pull out of the presidential race sometime between Super Tuesday, which is on March 5th, which is when the majority of states hold their primaries, between then and the November 5th election. And in this prediction, he said that Biden could bow out at the last minute for health reasons and end up passing the torch on to a replacement candidate that will be named by the DNC. And this prediction was published in the JP Morgan Asset Management document that was made public on January 1st. So this little theory has been out there for a couple weeks now. But how convenient is that if that's the case, right? Because if you get to the point where the primaries are over and he bows out at the last minute, what are they going to do? The DNC is going to do exactly that, just put in a replacement candidate without doing an election. And then on January 8th, Jesse Waters predicted that that replacement could be Michelle Obama. And we've talked about this before too. So according to the Washington Post, Obama's been visiting Biden, telling him he needs to like completely overhaul his campaign. And Jesse believes that Obama's like pushing Biden to push his political operation outside and beyond his advisors. And he says, translation, Barack and Michelle are taking over and the media agrees. So Michelle Obama recently did this interview with Jay Shetty on his podcast. And Jesse thinks that what she said in this interview is basically laying out the plan for her campaign. So let's listen to this clip from Fox News earlier this week. It's a long clip. I hope to God I got it stopped in the right place because I was having a little trouble with it, but let's see how this goes.
But if Trump isn't damaged goods by the convention, Michelle Obama's positioning herself as Plan B.
What's going to happen in this next election? I am terrified about what could possibly happen because our leaders matter. Who we select, who speaks for us, who holds that bully pulpit. It affects us in ways that sometimes I think people take for granted. You know, the fact that people think that government, does it really even do anything? And I'm like, oh my God, does government do everything for us? And we cannot take this democracy for granted. And sometimes I worry that we do. Those are the things that keep me up.
Our leaders matter? Is she talking about Trump or Biden? Hard to tell. But the former First Lady, who rarely expresses her political views so pointedly, is sending out the bat signal.
What is the thing that keeps you up at night?
More to do with the world that we're in. There's such a thing as knowing too much. It could be any range of things that comes across the desk of the leader of the free world, right? So I know a lot about what's going on, and what keeps me up are the things that I know. The war in the region, in too many regions. What is AI going to do for us? The environment, are we moving at all fast enough? What are we doing about education? Are people going to vote? And why aren't people voting? I mean, those are the things that keep me up because you don't have control over them. And you wonder, where are we in this? Where are our hearts?
Michelle Obama is talking about war, talking about artificial intelligence. This woman isn't just a fruit juice tycoon. She could be running. She even uncorked a new economic plan, mandatory trickle-down economics.
We have this trickle-down approach, right? That's the basis of a capitalistic economy, right? But that's not happening. Yes. It's not trickling. The law would require in whatever way, if we're not trickling voluntarily, then we need to be forced to trickle. Mandatory trickling down.
Yeah.
Forced to trickle. You're talking about Biden? Could this be worse than Bidenomics? Nothing could be worse. Who knows about Michelle's mandatory trickle? But Michelle wants you to remember it wasn't the Obama-Biden White House. It was the Barack and Michelle White House. Listen to how she uses the words we.
I'm so proud of my husband and the way he led, the way his administration worked, the team that we built. So proud of everyone. I think that's because of who we are.
Did she just forget to mention Joe Biden? Michelle, as your husband said, you didn't build that. But if I were Joe Biden, I don't know who I'd fear more, Trump or her. Let's bring in Lieutenant Governor Mark Robbins.
Okay. The words that she used, Stephanie, she just laid out the entire thing.
I am so disappointed to hear this. I mean, I knew it was coming, but yeah, she's totally going to run. And like,
Yeah.
I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, but what choice do Democrats have? Like, they have no other cards to play. And
Yeah.
I do think she's the only one that stands a chance of winning because you have so many people that'll vote for her simply because she checks a box and isn't as dumb as Kamala. And like, let's just look at this. Like, okay, forget the fact that her chef mysteriously died, and there's all these unanswered questions from his wife and others that are still not answered. Forget the fact that her husband bombed 7 countries during his presidency. You want to talk about war? He bombed 7 countries. Forget the fact that as the first Black president and first lady, they divided the country more than ever. Or how about the fact that the Black communities that were promised better schools, better jobs, better lives were never made better under his presidency? And forget the fact that they just produced a movie about America falling. So it's like, this scares me because people will still vote for her because they're naive and their head is in the sand and they don't like Trump and she checks 2 boxes. But her as a president, like, literally terrifies me.
Yeah, and everything she just said was terrifying because the way she talked about government and people taking government for granted, like she's speaking the truth because we take for granted the fact that we think our government doesn't fucking control everything we do, when in essence, they control our entire lives. And all they have to do is flip whatever switch they have going on, and they could destroy everything in all the ways that we talk about all the time. And she's laughing about it because she knows full well that they have that control. When she's talking about that and AI and the forced trickle down economics, like she is laying out the plan of what she's going to do when she gets into office. And it's frightening. And even Megyn Kelly weighed in on this. And she said that if Michelle Obama becomes the candidate for the Democratic side on the elections, she said, quote, "It's a whole new ballgame. There's no question she's more talented than Joe Biden is politically. No question," end quote. And she also called Michelle Obama a powerful Democratic weapon during her husband's 2 terms in the White House. And she talked about how, like, there was really no reason for Michelle to go on Jay's podcast in the first place, and that this is clearly a hint that she's launching her presidential bid. She said Michelle has, quote, "nothing to promote. She has no book. She has no event." So that means she called them and said, "I have something to say." Why is she saying it? To help Joe Biden or to help herself? Very interesting. She should surface now, end quote. And I completely agree. And then if we go back to last year, like Ted Cruz made the same prediction last September on his podcast. And he said Michelle Obama was going to be the candidate, but he at the time predicted that it wasn't going to happen until August of this year. And he said she's basically just going to parachute in as the presidential candidate at the last minute. Again, as per the DNC, with no elections.
Which is hilarious because she was saying like that our vote matters or whatever she said. Yet, like, no one's going to be voting for that. They're just going to put her in there and get rid of Biden.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Well, speaking of Michelle Obama, there is a whole other conspiracy going around about that movie, Leave the World Behind, that we did a previous episode on, and her and Barack produced. They were executive producers. So there are these sound engineers that have posted this viral video that's going around social media where they take the movie and they put it into their system and like separate the files from like the audio file from the video file. And typically when you do that, there's 2 files. There's an audio file and a video file. Well, when they did it, there were 4 audio files that they were able to separate. And one of them is a low frequency sound. So this, I kind of thought at first, okay, like I totally get it and believe this, but I'm not going to find anything to back it up. Nope, I sure did. There is a Yahoo News article that reads, quote, "This person seems to have discovered the low frequency effects track that is present in nearly every movie since Star Wars introduced it in 1977. And this is from Chris Kriakakis, who's an engineering professor at the University of Southern California who specializes in acoustics. And it goes on to say, quote, it contains the low frequency rumble, explosions, etc., and is beneficial because it reduces the amplifier load for the other speakers by using its own speaker called a subwoofer. There's absolutely no way to use this track as a weapon, end quote. So then I find something else that says how filmmakers have long used infrasound, which is noise at frequencies that are generally inaudible to humans, to make films eerier. And French director Gaspard Noé told Salon he used the technique for his controversial 2002 film Irreversible. Quote, you can't hear it, but it makes you shake, he said. In a good theater with a subwoofer, you may be more scared by the sound than by what's happening on the screen. A lot of people can take the images, but not the sound. Those reactions are physical, end quote. So this completely fascinated me because they're flat out admitting that every movie uses low frequency to elicit fear. And like this has been a rumor for a long time that both the film and the music industry do this, but now they're saying it. They're coming out and confirming this rumor. And as someone who knows a lot about these frequencies because I do all this stuff with subliminals, this is deeply disturbing. And you could go online right now, and there are a ton of articles. There's a lot of research out there on the negative effects of low frequencies. Like even the NIH, if you go on like PubMed, there's all kinds of studies, and one was a published randomized control trial on low frequency noise. And the results of this trial said that these findings suggest that LFN, or low frequency noise, at moderate levels might adversely affect visual functions, concentration, continuous and selective attention, especially in the high sensitive to LFN subjects. Then there was another study I came across by MDPI that concluded that the effects generated on human health from these low frequency noises include sleep disorders, discomfort, sensitivity to and irritability from noise, annoyance, hearing loss, and cardiovascular diseases. So, looking at history, like I've dug so, like there's such a rabbit hole you could go down with this, but it's said that Hitler's Ministry of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, figured out that these low frequency sounds create fear. And so they would play these publicly to keep people in a state of fear because that way they were easier to control. And there's this whole conspiracy that he worked with the Rockefellers to change the standard tuning from the Salveggio healing frequency, which is 432 hertz, to 440 hertz, which it's still at today. And 440 hertz leaves you feeling anxious and can be detrimental if you're exposed to it long term. And of course, like this whole thing is a conspiracy, but go on PubMed and start looking at the articles about low frequency, and you'll start to realize it's more of a conspiracy truth than just a conspiracy. So long story short, there is low frequency sound in the movie that the Obamas produced, which is probably why you feel very anxious and uneasy throughout the whole film. But I mean, I guess this is just normal. This is just something they do in Hollywood. No big deal. Nothing to see here, guys.
That's why it freaks me out to like go on YouTube, and if you're just searching like solfeggio frequencies or healing music or whatever, like you don't know what you're actually listening to, because depending on who puts it up there, you could be listening to something totally damaging.
Well, that's the thing. Like, people think about it when it comes to like subliminals or Solfeggio frequencies, but no one thinks about it when you turn on the radio or listen to like the top 100 playlist, all the big
Yeah.
songs. I mean, look at all the satanic imagery. We talked about like Lil Nas exposing it. They all are rumored to have these low frequency sounds throughout their tracks. And now it looks like people are confirming this. So it really makes you want to not listen to anything that's popular, whether it's a movie or a song.
We're not going to be able to do anything pretty soon. We
I
can't drink
know,
the
I know.
water. We can't eat the food. We can't do anything. But speaking of anxious and uneasy, like that also seems to be the global political theme around the United States elections for this year. So it's not just here. It's everywhere. There's a political risk consultancy firm called the Eurasia Group, and they released their top risks for 2024 report on Monday. And according to their website, this is a group that basically does like political risk analysis to help investors and business people understand how politics affects risks and opportunities in foreign markets. And so in this top risk assessment, they outlined 4 major risks that are facing the world in 2024. So the fourth greatest risk is ungoverned AI, which definitely is in my top 4.
Mhm.
The third greatest risk is the Russia-Ukraine war. The second greatest risk is the Israel-Hamas conflict and escalation of war in the Middle East. And the number 1 risk in the report is titled "The United States versus Itself." And so this report stated, quote, "The U.S. presidential election will worsen the country's political division, testing American democracy to agree the nation hasn't experienced in 150 years, and undermining U.S. credibility on the global stage. The United States is already the world's most divided and dysfunctional advanced industrial democracy. The 2024 election will exacerbate this problem no matter who wins. The only certainty is continued damage to America's social fabric, political institutions, and international standing," end quote. So it sounds like we're fucked any way you look at it. And
Yeah.
so it's, yeah. And speaking of fuck, Stephanie, do you want to fill everybody in on the level of fuckery that has been taking place in our government with our national defense communication?
Yeah, this left me feeling very hopeless, okay, on, our country being protected. So the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, made news over the past week for failing to notify the White House and senior staff that he was having surgery. And then he was subsequently hospitalized days later. And Congress wasn't notified of the hospitalization until January 5th, which was the same day it was made public to everyone. And so the Pentagon finally disclosed his medical condition after keeping everyone in the dark, saying that he had prostate cancer surgery on December 22nd. And a statement from his doctors, John Maddox and Gregory Chestnut, reads, quote, "The cancer was detected early and his prognosis is excellent." So he had the surgery December 22nd. On January 1st, he had severe hip and leg pain and nausea. So he was taken to the hospital by ambulance, where he still remains to this day. And according to a USA Today article, the Defense Department didn't alert the White House that Austin was in the hospital until 3 days after he was admitted. And they didn't make the information public until late last Friday, which was the day after the White House was notified. And even then, the Pentagon did not divulge to the president or to the public the nature of his illness or like what the hell was going on. And there was an ABC News article that reported that Senator Tom Wickers, who's the ranking Republican in the Senate Armed Services Committee, wrote a letter to Austin on Wednesday. And this was signed by all the Republicans on the committee. And it reads, quote, "We are deeply troubled by the apparent breakdown in the communication between your office and the rest of the Department of Defense, the White House, and Congress over the past 2 weeks. Further, the apparent failure to even notify your lawful successor in this case is massive failure of judgment and negligence. It is an intolerable breach of trust with the American people at a dangerous moment for U.S. national security. In particular, the administration needs to provide answers on how it complied with the Federal Vacancies Reform Act. The FVRA is an extension constitutional principle that the American people have the final say through the Senate's consent over who fills our nation's most important executive roles." And then you have House Armed Services Committee Chairman Rep. Mike Rogers, who wrote 3 letters, one to Austin, one to the Department Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks, and Austin's Chief of Staff Kelly Magsamen, requesting information around the events that surrounded Austin's hospitalization. So this letter reads, quote, "It is unacceptable that neither the Department of Defense, the White House, nor the Congress were accurately informed of your position or capacity. With wars in Ukraine and Israel, the idea that the White House and even your own deputy did not understand the nature of your condition is patently unacceptable. So what happened here was the deputy who's supposed to fill in for the defense secretary in emergencies was on vacation in Puerto Rico because no one told her. She had no idea that he was having surgery or that he was hospitalized. So, like, this is crazy. While he's hospitalized, he tells them that he's working from home. Okay. So he outright lies. And now the Defense Department was like covering for him. And I mean, like, think about this. I think about any job that I have ever had. If I would have said that I was working from home when I was really having surgery and then like hospitalized and I didn't notify my boss or coworkers, I would have been fired immediately. And like, we're talking about the job of the defense secretary. Like, this is one of the most important jobs in the world, especially now when we're on the verge of a world war and we can't risk looking weak or unprepared, you know? And so, like, this man's job is to keep our country and everyone in it safe. And he was MIA for nearly 2 weeks without anyone knowing. Like, I don't even know how that's possible. I mean, I just don't know how that's possible. So, Fox News White House reporter Peter Doocy like laid into John Kirby about the fact that our president should be in communication 24/7 with the defense secretary, given the state of the world right now with World War III on the horizon. So I'm going to play an exchange between the what's his name, Peter Doocy and John Kirby. So listen to this.
What kind of commander-in-chief is President Biden that at a time when American forces are under fire in the Middle East, he can go days without knowing that his defense secretary is in a hospital bed?
Peter, there's a lot to your question, so I want you to bear with me for just a second. First of all, at no time was the ability for the United States military to defend our national security interests.
Should we believe anything that this administration tells us about anything ever again?
I think we all recognize, and I think the Pentagon has been very, very honest with themselves about the challenge to credibility by what has transpired here and by how hard it was for them to be fully transparent with the American people.
At least they had John Kirby instead of KJP.
Oh, shit.
Even though his voice was like shaking, you can tell he's like, we're screwed. Like, this is so bad. But I mean,
there's no excuse for it.
There's no excuse.
None.
And I am so glad that Peter Doocy like called him out like that. Like, he makes a great point because this basically showed the president's hand and how this administration is failing at every level. Like, Biden has no idea what's going on, and apparently neither does his team. Like, how the hell does the defense secretary go 2 whole weeks without anyone wondering where he was? And, you know, meanwhile, there's 2 hot wars taking place and threats from China, North Korea, and Iran. It's like,
Yeah. And you know who else didn't know? What is it? Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor. He had no idea either.
right. So thank God we like something didn't happen where we needed a clear and decisive like decision from this guy. But the other problem is the whole world sees this now as a weakness, and the fact that our commander in chief is clueless. And so we've talked about this before, like every time they show this weakness, it really does threaten our national security. So I came across this scathing article in Newsweek from a man named John Wolf Wagner, who's a retired Army officer and Iraq veteran. And it says, quote, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin's recent hospitalization, shrouded in secrecy and punctuated by questionable decisions, has laid bare a stark reality. America lacks competent leadership at the helm of its armed forces. This is not merely a matter of optics or personal health. It speaks to a systemic dysfunction that jeopardizes national security and demands Austin's immediate resignation. And I 100% agree with that. Yet Biden says that he still supports Austin, and Austin has no intention of resigning. So he's like just going to get away with this. As
Because they
usual.
always do. Yeah, it's the no accountability presidency, and they will do whatever they want, throw it in our faces, and be like, "What are you going to do about it?"
Right. And could you imagine, like, if this happened while Trump was president, every news station would
Oh.
be covering it like nonstop. Like, it's just crazy. So it really, it was really concerning.
But this wouldn't happen under Trump's
No,
administration because he would know where his fucking defense secretary
he would
was.
know. He'd be in communication with them, and which Biden said that he's in communication with Austin all the time. Well, clearly or not, if you go 2 weeks and don't even know that this guy's like in the hospital. And it's just worrisome because I know we've talked about this before, how like, is it scarier to think that there's someone pulling the puppet strings, or is it scarier to think that there's no one pulling the puppet strings and they really are just a clusterfuck and have no idea what's going on? And I think we're starting to see that there is no one in control. Like they're completely incompetent.
And is it also not scarier to think that pretty soon it could be Michelle Obama pulling the puppet strings?
Yeah. I mean, we invaded 7 countries under Barack, so I hold out no hope when it comes to war if she gets elected. And this is like so concerning to me that it seems like she's gearing up for that. So let's just keep our fingers crossed that people don't fall for it and our country is safe moving forward. Well, man, like I'm telling you, it's just nonstop this year so far. So, yeah, ugh, gosh, I dread to see what's going to come up in the next few days, but we'll keep everyone posted. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here in a few
Only
days.
Wednesday. It's only Wednesday.
It is?
Yeah.
No, it's Thursday. It's
It
Friday.
is?
Yeah, today
It
we're recording
is?
on Thursday.
Oh my God. I totally thought this was Wednesday. I
For
think I
once,
said.
I get the day right and you get it wrong. That never happens. It's always
I
me that
even
doesn't
said in
know.
the beginning, happy Wednesday. I totally thought this was Tuesday. See, I don't even know what fucking day it is. Well, happy
Yeah,
Friday.
well, we have the weekend to
Yeah.
recover, although there's probably going to be lots of stuff that happens, so we'll see. But
Oh.
all right, well, happy Friday, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.